My name is D.T. Robbins. This story is entitled Cassafras, and this is an excerpt from the story. As I mentioned before, the reattached power line may not function the way it used to. If there was any kindness to your former ex-lover, John Jacobson, it is either dissipated or is malfunctioning inside her conscious circuitry. While she is not necessarily cruel, there is an almost cruel curiosity within her to test the boundaries of her own ability while interacting with the tangible world. For example, as I was mowing the lawn one afternoon, I found a rattlesnake coiled behind my tool shed. I heard a hiss in the wind. The snake rose in a trance and began striking the air. At once I grabbed my weed eater and hacked it to bits, but not without fear for my own safety, to be sure. Do you still have the nightmare where snakes are eating you alive, Cassafras? With Jean persisting at my side, something has occurred. I can't properly explain it, but perhaps you can shed some light. She is growing irritated, I think. There are moments when she tries to convey messages to me, but they prove too difficult for me to properly translate. These messages come out in singular utterances or phrases, echoing in my mind like metal upon metal. I assumed at first they were perhaps lost song lyrics of yours. If they are, that would explain much. However, along with these phrases, John's consciousness has demonstrated a stronger emotional reverberation. In the past, upon conveying memories into my own consciousness, I have felt much of what she has felt: romance, sadness, regret. However, with these few phrases, I sense only wildness, destruction, and chaos. Tell me, do these make sense to you? Under the blanket, caveat, believe me, she, no thorn, she. Find the mahogany candle, find the this and that. This is a great deal to take in, especially to someone who may not be familiar with the workings of consciousness and the planes of living and non-living. Of late, I have found myself losing track of time. Some things I possess aren't mine. Miss Friedman, Cassafras, do you have any reason to believe Jean means you harm? The story, I think, is essentially, it's up for debate the true intention of the author. So the John Friedman, who is a so-called meditation guru with her, I believe he calls it meta-communicative meditation, is contacting a former pop rock star about the fact that he says her former / ex deceased lover the consciousness is living with him. So he's reaching out to this woman. So the debate is all of this really happening, or is he just some crazy stalker fan? But he breaks down a lot of the mechanics of how the meta-communicative meditation works, and it gets interesting from there on out when he starts talking about Jean and Cassafras's relationship and how it affects him now. I had read a story from a good friend of mine, a fantastic writer named Greg Chandler. It was a story called Sock Factory in Hobart. And after reading that, the idea of writing a letter as a story just seemed really interesting to me. It was something I've been wanting to try for a couple of years. I wrote this story in 2019, and I had originally read his story in 2017. But the story itself didn't really come to me until much later. But when I finally sat down and said, I'm going to do this in a letter form, it just came really naturally. I don't feel like it would have been told in a better format other than through the letter. I think there's in my like you said, my opinion, though inexperienced, but I've read some really good ones. There's a few things I think you can. There are a few different ways you can approach a letter and making it interesting. I think one of the first ways you can do it is focusing on voice. I mean, writing from a character's perspective. One of the things that happens in fiction a lot is we get too tied up in dialogue, and this is essentially almost like one giant piece of dialogue. I think when you give a character a unique voice, you can almost talk about anything, no matter how mundane it is, and no matter how boring it is. But if you're talking about going grocery shopping, but the character has an interesting way of describing their trip to the grocery store, that can make for an incredible letter, or whatever the case is, whatever they're writing about. The other thing is, as in the case with my particular story, is I don't feel that the voice in my story is as strong as the context. So I kind of went, for lack of a better term, balls to the wall, batshit crazy with mine, and wanted to really see how out there I could get. I enjoy strange, weird fiction as it is. So this was sort of my approach to it. Like I said, the voice isn't as strong as the context. So being free to, almost get a little crazy with what you're writing about really kind of frees you up. And if you're able to pull the two together, where you have an incredible, strong voice matched with something, outlandish or what have you, you might have the working of the making of a very strong piece. Yeah, no, it was Greg Chandler. Like I said, I've known Greg for years, but his story Sock Factory in Hobart Pulp was the first fiction that I'd read. At least one that stood out to me in a letter format. And what I loved about that piece was, kind of as I mentioned before, the voice was so incredibly strong, and the story was so incredibly sad. It was essentially, without ruining anything, it was about, it was almost like a Facebook message from one woman to another woman who, thanking her for accepting her friend request after years of not speaking to each other, and they went to elementary school together, middle school, or whatever it was, and she's just talking about her life and how things have progressed, or I guess not progressed, as she's gotten older, and it's just so incredibly heartbreaking and funny at the same time. That story was just, that was one of those where I think the voice and the context or content were just so good. That one, is absolutely fantastic. I run a literary journal called Rejection Letters. If you want to go check that out, it's rejection-letters.com. We have some fantastic pieces there. I have a fantastic group of editors that I work with: Kevin Kearney, Jaya, Charlotte, Lindsay. We have some awesome stuff there. You can read more of my work at dtrobbins.com. Follow me on Twitter at dt_Robbins. That would be it. But thank you very much, Todd, for having me. This has been very cool, and I'm very grateful.